All right, guys, so in this video, we're going to build a to-do app using Django 3.0. This project is designed to quickly get you set up and started with a Django app and familiar with basic create, update, and delete functionality. So I do have a full Django crash course series, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time covering each topic. This is more of a quick start and build along. So if you're starting with Django, you should already have Python installed, and if you don't already have Django installed, you can do a quick pip install Django. And this should give you the latest version of Django. And if you're here because of the new Django update to 3.0, we could upgrade our Django version by doing pip install dash dash upgrade, then Django equals, and we're currently on 3.0. If you're on a higher version, from the time this video comes out, just specify your version number, but we're going to do 3.0. And that should go ahead and run all the installs. I already have it, so it might take a minute if you're doing the upgrade. As far as the Django updates go, I took some time to read the documentation and actually compared a 2.2 and a 3.0 project side by side, and didn't notice any changes that a beginner should be particularly concerned about, other than the fact that Django no longer supports Python 3.5 or lower. So make sure you have the latest version of Python, or at least 3.6 or higher. So all the other stuff like Django async and filter expressions, I would just recommend that you just read the documentation when you're at that point, but I know a lot of beginners aren't there yet, so I'm not going to spend time covering that. Before we launch our first project files, we want to make sure we're in the directory of where we want those files to actually be. I'm going to have mine in the desktop, and from here, because I have Django installed already, I can run a command that will give us those boilerplate files. So from here, I'm going to do Django-admin start project, and we're going to give our project a name, so I'm going to call mine to do. And now in my desktop, because I ran the command from there, I can now see these basic files, or this folder that Django just set up for us with our app configuration ready to be set up. So I'll go ahead and actually open that folder up in Sublime Text, so my text editor here, and we'll go to desktop, and I need to find the right file path. Okay, so here are my files, and these are the default files that I have, and I actually go over these in my Django crash course, so I won't go into too much detail here, but all the configuration will happen within settings.py, and I'll go ahead and turn on our server. So make sure we're in that project file, so go ahead and cd in there, and I have it here somewhere. Okay, so right here, and I'm going to do to do. Okay, so we're now in the project folders, and once we're in here, we can turn on our server. So I'm going to do python manage.py run server. And from here, we can see that our server is running on port 8000. So what I like to do is, you can go ahead and paste this in into the browser or just type that in. But what I like to do is actually save it here into these tabs here, so that way I don't have to type that in each time. So if you're seeing this, it means that your app was successfully set up and you're seeing the default page that Django has built for us. I'm now gonna actually set up our database and create a user so we can do /admin and see the Django admin panel. Let's go back to the command prompt and actually turn off that server. And to do that, we're gonna do Control-C, and sometimes you need to do that twice to actually turn it off, and we'll migrate our first database. So to do that, we'll do python manage.py migrate, and that's going to run our first migration. And by default, Django uses SQLite, so we're going to get it set up with that. Normally you'd want to use something like Postgres or MySQL, but we'll stick with this. So this migration just created our default tables, so our user tables and all the other default settings that Django wants us to have. And now we're going to create our first user. So now that that's ready, we'll do python manage.py create super user, and that's all one word, and give our user a name, set up your email, and as you type the password, it won't type, but it will be being added there, so go ahead and just do that twice. And let's turn on our server and log into the admin panel and run server. Okay, so now that we have that, we can do /admin and go ahead and type in your username and password. I already have mine by default, so I'll just hit login, and this is our admin panel. Here's our user. We have that set up so we can go ahead and start actually configuring things. So I'm going to launch our app now, and that's where all of our database tables are going to sit, and all the URL routing along with the views and all the other Django functionality. So I'm going to turn off that server again and run Python manage.py start app. I'm going to name my app tasks. So I want it to be a little bit different from to do. I don't want to get confused there. And that set up my basic app with the models file, views there. And now in my settings.py file, I just need to go ahead and let Django know about that app. So whatever you called your app, just go ahead and add that into installed apps here. And now we can set up our URL routing. So in our app and views, I want to first set up our view function that will just return an HTTP response, and we'll call it index. And we'll just do request. And we'll just return an HTTP response. So I need to make an import for that, and it's going to be from django.http import HTTP response. And now we can return it here. And we'll just say hello world. Okay, so now we need to set up our URL route, and I'll split this up, and we need to create a urls.py file. So urls.py, and in here we need to run a few imports. So from django.urls import path, and let's set up a URL pattern. So URL patterns, and that'll just be a list. And we want to let our first path call that index view right here. So just call this function, and that'll be when we call the home page. And we'll also import views so we can actually access this. So from the root import views, and now we can say views.index, and that'll just trigger this HTTP response. But before we can actually see this, we need to go back to our base urls.py file and actually let it know about this one. So I'll move this here, and let's add include, and this will just let us include that file. So we'll create another URL path and set that as the base URL path and do include. And we'll do our app name, so tasks.urls. And this should set up that response. So let's turn on our server and see if we get this back. Python manage.py run server. Okay, something went wrong. From Django HTTP import HTTP response. I spelled response wrong. Okay, that should do it. And make sure that's correct. And that should now return that value. So if we go back to our base URL, perfect. So we're getting back this HTTP response. Now let's actually build out a template so we can render something, and then we'll set up our database. So in our app tasks right here, we're going to create a file called templates, and this is just the way Django wants us to store it. And within templates, we need to create another file with the name of our app. So ours is called tasks, and in here we can create our templates. So I'll call mine list.html, and let's just oops, I don't know what I clicked there, but we'll just do a h3 response or tag, and we'll just say to do. And now within our views, we can actually change this from just an HTTP response to return an actual template. So this render function right here is what we're going to use, and this takes a few parameters. Right now we'll just do two, and we'll do render. It takes in the request and the template, and to get the template we specify the file path of tasks /list.html. So that should return back a template now. Okay, everything's working good there. And now I can set up our database. So before we start adding more URL paths here, we're going to go to models.py and create our first item. And I'm going to call this, we're going to create a model called task. So we'll do class task, and we'll just import or include models, or inherit from models.model, and the name of the task, or I'll just say title, and maybe we'll add some descriptions to it later, but for now we'll just do models.character field, so char field, and we'll set the max length to 200 for now. And we'll just do a status of complete or not, so this will just be a true or false value, and this will just be a Boolean field. So models.Boolean, and I'm going a little slower, it's kind of hard for me to think and type at the same time, so Boolean field default we'll start with that value of being false, so it's not going to be complete. Okay, and the last thing we'll do is set a created date. So created is going to be models.date time field, and we just want to know when each item was created, so we want this to auto add, so it's going to be auto underscore now underscore add, and we're going to set that to true. So every time an item's created, we don't have to set this value, it's just going to be created by default, and we'll just set the string value underscore str and 2 underscores there, and we'll pass in self and just return self.title. Okay, so we need to migrate our database now, or we need to run a migration. I spelled default wrong there. So let's turn that off, and let's do Python manage.py make migrations. And that's just going to prep the database, and now we can actually migrate it. So it's going to add those tables in. So it's going to add the model of tasks as a database table. And now we can just do Python manage.py migrate. Okay, so that's in there. And I can go ahead and just add a few tasks here in the admin panel just to see how everything looks and make sure it's running. Run server, and in admin.py, so if I have this, if I go to the admin panel here /admin, and I won't see that table yet, so I need to register this, and that's going to be done in admin.py. So from here we'll just import models from models import, and we just want to import all of them, so we'll just do star, and we'll do admin.site.register, and we want to register the task model. And now we can see it, so I'll just go ahead and add 2 quick tasks, and I'll just say pick up milk, and let's say do tutorial. Okay, so both of those are considered incomplete tasks, and now what I'm going to do is actually render these out in the template. So in our view, we can actually go ahead and import those. So I'm going to import all the models, and I'll just do from models import, and we'll import everything and go ahead and just make a query for those. So we'll do tasks, and we'll just do task dot objects dot all, and we want to grab everything, and I'm going to make a context dictionary here so we can throw everything directly in here and pass it into our render function. So that'll be an empty dictionary, and we'll just pass these in. And context is going to be added as a third parameter to render now, so we'll throw that out. And in our template, now we can go ahead and render these out. So I'll just do, let's create a for loop here and go ahead and just output these. So we'll do start the for loop. So for task in tasks, and we'll just end it really quick. And then we'll actually create something, a placeholder for it. End for. Okay, so we want each task to be in its own div, and we'll just pass in the task as a paragraph tag. So just as some text, and we'll just do task. Okay, so it's in our template. We've passed it into our views, and let's see that output here. Okay, perfect. So we have our 2 tasks. Let's go ahead and actually create a form where we can add a few, and we'll build a form in right here so we can, just like in our demo, we can add it in directly here, and then we'll actually be able to click these edit and delete buttons. There's a few ways I can go about the create and update functionality, and I know some people like the built-in class-based views. I personally don't like those. They're very easy to work with, but when things get more complicated or when a beginner needs to understand how things work, it's too easy just to make it work but not understand it. So if that's your preference, that's fine. I prefer to use something called model forms. So in our app here, we're going to create a file called forms.py. So forms.py. And what these are basically a form representation of a model. So we have this model task, and when we specify which model we're going to replicate, it's going to create all the form fields for us, and it's very easy to import it into our template. So I'll go ahead and run a few imports here. From Django import forms, and from Django.forms import model form. So it'll make sense once I build it out, but I'll just start by building out a class-based form, and we'll do from models import, and I'm just going to go ahead and import all of them. And to create a model form, it's just a class, and I like to use a method of naming it whatever my model name is and just ending it with form. So we're going to inherit from forms.model form, and now we're going to do class meta, and we need to give it a minimal of 2 values. And the first one's going to be which model are we trying to create a form for, and the model is task, and what fields are we going to allow in that form. And for now, I just want to allow all of them. So fields, and this is just going to be a string value underscore underscore all underscore underscore. So now that I have the form, I can just import it into my view, and from my view, import it into my template and actually render it. So from forms, import, and we'll just do all of them again. And I called my form task form. So in here, we're going to do, oops, can't click out of that. Form equals to task form, and it's a function there. And we'll just pass it in right here into our template, so form. Now in our template, we are going to first set up a HTML form, and we can do these template tags here and just pass it in, and I'll just set up an input field. And the type is going to be submit, and it doesn't build out these by default, so we still need to add in items like this, and the value will be create task. And in our template, now when we refresh it, we passed in that form, so we didn't have to manually add in this input field and this checkbox. All we had to do was create that submit button, and that created a form for us. Because I just passed in form, it gives us this checkbox too, but I only want this checkbox to show up when we're actually editing an item. So in here, just like our demo here, I only want one field. So to do this, all I need to do is actually access this and specify the field that I want to access. And that's just going to be form.task. And that's just going to give us this, oh, sorry, not task, but title. That's what we called it. So form.title, and now we should only see that one field. So let's actually have this form create something. So in our template, we are first going to have to set the method of post, or sorry, yeah, we're going to set the method to post, and the action is going to be to the base URL path. So it's going to, whatever we submit this form to, when we submit it, it's going to send us back to this view. So what we're going to say is if request.method is equal to post, we want to actually create something. So we're going to do form, and we'll use the same task form here. And this time we're going to pass in the post method, request.post, and that value is now going to be passed in the form, and then we are going to save that form. So first we're going to say if form.is_valid form.save, and that will actually save it to the database. And if that's valid, we want to actually, I'm going to go back one. If the request method is post, we actually want to return, and we want to return the same exact template. So we want to actually go back to this view, except for we want to come back as a get method now. So we'll just do return, and we're going to pass in from Django shortcuts redirect, and we'll do return redirect, and we'll just send it back to that same URL path. So let's go ahead and refresh that and say, we'll just say 1. Okay, I forgot to add a CRF token here, CRSF_token. That's what we need to do. So in here, we just need to let Django know that we are able to take this. So CSRF_token, and this just adds some security to it. And now if I try doing that again, it should create that task. And I don't know why that's happening. Oh, I need to pass it in with a different template tag. It needs to be percent signs here. And let's try that one more time. Okay, so if I just do 1, 2, okay, perfect. So what's happening is it's submitting it to the same exact view as a post method. Then the post method goes ahead and throws that into the form, saves it, and redirects us back to the same template. So now let's go ahead and actually add some edit functionality. So we'll build out a new template so we can actually go to a single item and change its value from complete or just remove it. So I'll just go ahead and make a template for that, and I'm going to call my template update_task.html, and let's just add some items to that template. Let's build it out a little bit, and we'll say update task. Okay, so I'll throw in a form here. It'll be an empty form for now, but we'll actually throw in a form through our view. So we'll just set up the input first, and the type will be submit, and the name will be update item or update task. So we'll do that. And this view is going to be a little bit more dynamic than the one above. So this is going to be update task, and we'll throw in the request to it. And with the request, we're actually going to throw in a dynamic URL path. So we're actually going to throw in the primary key in the URL. So we'll throw it in as the primary key, and we can name this whatever we want, but that's just a method I like to use. So let's just go ahead and return a template, see what we have, and then we'll build everything else out. So request and tasks / update_task.html. Okay, so in this view, let's actually grab the item now. So I just want to show you how this works. The item is going to be, so task, and that's going to be task.objects.get, and the ID, we're going to grab the ID from the URL pattern. So that's going to be thrown in there. So that's how we're actually able to retrieve an object. And let's go ahead and build out that URL pattern. So we'll do path, and let's just write out the pattern, update task / and this is how we make it dynamic. So we can do int and just pass in an integer, but I like the string value just because it works with numbers and letters there. So I called it PK here, so that's why we call it PK right here. So we can name it whatever we want. So let's go ahead and just finish it up with a view. And I'm actually going to make these more dynamic for doing this the Django way. So the URL path is, we're not going to have to do a hard-coded path. We're actually just going to give it a name, and we'll call it this way. So the home page, we'll call it list, and this one, we'll just say name is going to equal to update_task. So I want to view this page from my list here. So with this dynamic name, that's actually how we're going to call the URL pattern. So we called it update task right here. So I'm just going to copy that, And in my list, I'm actually going to throw in a link here. And so close that out, and we're going to say update. And then the link is going to be href, and we're going to use these template tags, the 2% signs. And we're going to say URL, single quotes, update task. So that's that name we just made. And we're going to throw in the ID. So in order to pass it in right here, we're just going to do task.id, and that should create a link to that pattern. So if I go to my list now, and we'll close this out. If I go to the list and look at this URL pattern, it just created that link. So if I click on, let's say, update milk, we're going to see 1 go into that URL pattern. If I do tutorial, we're going to see 3. So let's actually pass in a form now. And I actually currently don't have that input field yet. So with that item that we just retrieved, we're actually going to make a form, but that form is going to have the instance of the object we got. So form is going to be task form. And in task form, we're going to do instance is going to equal to the task. So if we just pass in a form, it'll give us a blank form, but because the instance is of this object, so it obviously has to be of the same model, it'll pre-fill that form for us. So let's just go ahead and pass that into the context now. And we'll throw it into the render function. So form and form. And we'll just paste this into this render method. And now in our template, we can actually pass in that token and the form. So we'll first do the token. So CSRF underscore token. Oops. And now let's just go and throw in the form here. So double curly braces and keep making this happen right here. So we'll just do form. So now when I go here, if I actually click on one of these links, we should see the form pre-filled. So there we go, pick up milk and do tutorial. So it's actually pre-filling that form, and we're able to mark that as complete or incomplete. So let's actually process that. So when we hit submit here, something actually happens. We're able to update that. So first we'll throw in a post method into the form. So method is going to be post, and the action is it's going to be just this URL that we currently have. So we're actually going to leave that blank. So we want it sent back to that same URL. So we're currently on that URL, and it's going to send it right back to it. So just like we did in the index, we're going to process that. So in here, let's do if request.method is equal to post. Let's grab that form. So I'll just grab this instance, and we'll do the same thing. So we'll pass in the request.post right here. And we need to still throw in the instance. So if I just leave request.post like we did right here, it'll actually create a new item even though it has the old item's instance. So it'll create a new item. So we need to say we're throwing in this new data, but we're still updating the instance of this item. So we'll just go ahead and save this now. And we're going to do if form dot is underscore valid form dot save, and we're actually going to redirect it back to the home page. So we're just going to redirect it there, and let's just test this out. So pick up milk, and we'll just do updated and submit, and we just marked it as complete, and 2 is going to be 3 now, and we'll just make a note. And there we go. So it updates those. It actually goes and processes that, saves the item, and sends us back. So to close this out, all we need to do is add a delete button, and we just need to style this and make it look good. Before the user deletes an item, I like to give them the option to confirm their action. So what I'm going to do is actually make a template, and when they click delete, instead of deleting the item directly, we're going to ask them a quick question and give them the option to confirm it or cancel. So let's do a paragraph tag here, and I wrote out my question. So we're going to say, are you sure you want to delete? Well, instead of just saying, are you sure you want to delete, just as a blank question like that, we want to throw in the item so they can see, maybe if they selected the wrong item, they can confirm it and notice that it was the wrong one that they selected. So we're going to pass in the item so it'll actually say it. So the task itself will be confirmed. And for this, what we're going to do is the first thing we're going to do is give them an option to go back. So we're going to say cancel. And this link is just going to point to the home page. So if they cancel, it'll just reroute them back and they can continue doing what they're doing. And the home page we called list. So the first option is to send them back. So let's create a template for this and see what it looks like. And it's going to be similar to the update method where we actually have to pass in a dynamic URL here or a primary key. So we'll just do delete task, and this will take in request and then the primary key, and we'll just return that template and the actual item with it. So render request, and the template was just delete. So tasks / delete.html. And now in our URL, we're going to do again the same thing for as we did for update. So I'll actually just copy and paste this, and we'll just do delete and pass in this template or this view. Okay, so delete, we pass in the ID, the view's right, and let's actually pass in, because in the template we're actually looking for that item, it's going to give us an error if we don't pass it in right now. So we'll just do item is going to equal to task.objects.get, and then that ID that we passed in, so primary key from here, and we'll render that out. So I called it item here, so that's how we have to pass it into the view. So we'll just do item, and that's going to be this item that we just got, and we'll throw in context, and we'll actually link it out in the list. So in our list, we're going to create one more link here, and that'll be the second one in, and that'll just be delete. So okay, so now we should actually be able to click on that, and I probably should change the name to delete right here. Okay, so delete. Are you sure you want to delete pick up milk updated? And we can cancel. And are you sure you want to, oh, that was update. This says, are you sure you want to delete 1? So we're able to confirm it and actually see what we're deleting. So let's go ahead and build out that confirm process, and then we'll finish up the styling. So let's go to our template, or our actual, this template right here. So to do this, we want to send a post method, and I'm actually not sure how to send post methods with a link, or if you can, so I'm not going to spend time doing that. We'll just build it out as a form. So we'll prep it with a CSRF token, CSRF underscore token, and the method is going to be post, because we're going to send it back to this view right here. So method is going to equal to post, and the action, again, we can, because we're sending it to the same URL, the action is just going to be left blank. And normally if you're deleting this and trying to send it to another function or another URL, you would actually just pass that in here. But for here, all we're going to do is throw in an input. It's not actually going to be a form. So we'll just say submit, and the value is going to be confirm. And we won't style this page, so it's going to look a little ugly, but it's going to do the job. Confirm. Okay, so we're going to send the action back. So let's just make sure we have it, and we'll fix that right there. Oh, it's right here. Okay, so when we click confirm, it's going to send a post method back to this view. So we're going to do if request method dot post again, but we don't need a form or anything like that. So we're going to do item dot delete, and then we'll redirect it back to the home page. So back to that list, and we'll clean that up. Okay, so do we want to delete 1? So let's actually start with our list. Let's delete 3 actually. So delete, confirm, and 3 is no longer there. We'll delete 1, and perfect. So now we're deleting our items. So before I style the page, I actually want to cross off these items if they're complete. So this one is complete, and this one is not complete. So We don't always want to delete the items. We just may want to cross them off the list like a real to-do list, because you still might want to see that there. So let's just write a conditional with our template tag, and we'll say if task dot complete, and we're just going to reference this complete attribute is equal to true. And because it's Boolean, we don't need to put in quotes here. So if it's true, we want to go ahead and cross this out. So to cross it out, we're going to use the strike tag here. So the strike HTML tag. And we'll say if it's complete, strike it out. And if it's not, so else, go ahead and just add it, and we'll just use a span tag instead of a paragraph tag now. And we'll just throw in the tag. So if it's good, cross it. If it's not, don't. And we just need to close off this if statement. So now we just need to do end if. And if I go to my template, that should cross out the complete items. So there we go. Pick up milk is complete, and do tutorial is incomplete still. So it's not crossed out. So that's it as far as the CRUD functionality and the functionality of the app itself. If you want to stay and watch the styling part of this, I'm going to make it look like we had in that demo. So go ahead and stick around for that. And I'll start off by removing this to-do title here and pasting in some CSS that I've already wrote out and Bootstrap. So I just hit Control V right there and pasted in my CSS. So we have this Bootstrap CDN, and that just helps us with styling. We're able to write classes and style our buttons and divs and everything else. And in my CSS, we just set the background to the body. We styled our inputs, changed up some button colors, and created that column so all of our code is centered, and styled each item row. So if I save this, and my HTML is now down here, if I save this, this is what we have so far. And we're going to make this better by adding the classes and divs. So let's start by first creating that center item for the actual to-do list. So to do that, I'm going to close in everything in a div, and we'll call this div center column. And here's the CSS for that right here. So we set the width to 600 and we center it. So let's just close that off and make an indentation here so we can see that. And every time I make a change, I'll just jump back and show you what's happening. So that just centered everything, and we styled our input fields there. So now let's update the buttons. So each button, we're going to use Bootstrap for these. So we're going to use the Bootstrap BTN and then BTN dash, and I want to use the color of info. And info just gives us a blue button. And we're going to style these buttons too. So we're going to copy and paste this into these two. And I want the button here to be BTN-SM, so it gives us a small button. And this one I'm going to have as info too, so I still want that blue. And this one I'm going to have as that red button that Bootstrap gives us, but I wanted to keep the styling but change the color to yellow. So if I refresh this, we're going to see our button colors change. Okay, so we have our yellow and blue button, and I forgot to put the small attribute in there. So for this one, we're going to do BTN-SM. And now let's actually style the actual to-do list. So in this for loop, or around it, we're going to make another div. And we'll close it off right here. And we'll call this, actually I don't need to indent that, that's already indented. So we'll do class is going to equal to do-list. And the CSS for that is right here. Just about to point to it. You know what? I'm not sure where that is, so let's refresh it and see what happens. I don't think we actually use that. So I'm just going to leave that there, but it's irrelevant. So we'll just leave it. I don't think it does anything, but just to not break anything for this tutorial, I'll leave it. Now for each row, I created a div already around every single item. So we loop and create multiple divs. I just need to create this class. And this is going to be the class of item-row. So the background will just be set to purple, and we'll create some drop shadows here. So here's the CSS. And if I refresh that, There we go. So it's styled pretty good. The last thing I need to do is add in that placeholder. So here's our demo. We just want to say add new task. Now that's not going to be CSS, and I do cover this, or I probably will cover this in my crash course. I haven't gotten to it yet, but we want to, in our form, because we're not outputting in normal HTML, we can't just add that placeholder tag. So in forms.py, we're going to paste in, or I'm just going to go ahead and paste something in here. We can actually customize certain fields this way. So we have the task field, and we just added this widget that grabs that form field and sets the text input to add new task. So it sets the placeholder value. And again, this isn't a forms tutorial, so I won't cover it here, but that should do it. Oh, I called it task. I need to call it title. That's what we call their model field. So if I do this, that should now have our placeholder, and it looks exactly like our demo. So perfect. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, if you found it helpful, make sure you're subscribed to my channel. I am going to be putting a lot of videos out on Django, JavaScript, and just a ton more content. I'm getting started here, so follow along if you found this helpful, and thank you for your support.